Pose 316. Study Session 13. Major characteristics of military and civil rule in Nigeria. Students are employed to check the introduction and learning outcomes in Lecture 10. Now to the contents. Civil rule. Broadly speaking, civil rule in Nigeria has over the years implied no other thing than the examples analyzed under the parliamentary and presidential systems of government. For the purpose of comparison, we may just need to note that the basic distinction between civil rule and military regimes that will be discussed in the subsequent section of this lecture include: A. The existence of a constitution during civil rule and the revocation or setting aside of the constitution under military rule. B. The existence or absence of the constitution under the two regime types makes the probability of constitutional rule higher during civil rule than under military rule. In other words, it is more probable that such constitutional provisions as the rule of law, respect for human rights and dignity, accountability, openness and competition will be observed more during civil rule, particularly because the constitution is allowed to stay. C. It also makes the probability of political stability higher. And lastly, we can infer that the probability of development is higher during civil rule. However, there are several examples of military regimes under which many countries around the world experience economic growth that may not lead to actual development. Military rule. This is another type. Take two. This is another type of government or administrative system that is important to us as students of comparative methodologies because of many unique features and the adoption of the administrative system by many African countries at different points in time, and particularly because of Nigeria's long encounter with the system until 1999, when the country returned to civil rule in its Fourth Republic. Thus, we shall now quickly examine some of the major characteristics of military rule or a military regime, and they include: 1. Rule by force. Since the military always come to power through force, otherwise known as coup d'etat, they need to remain in office by force. This explains why they usually abolish the constitution. This implies that military rule discourages competition and opposing views, all of which constitute major ingredients of democratic rule and development agenda. 2. No fixed term of office. Unlike the civilian military regimes, Unlike the civilian, military regimes have no fixed term of office. The military government relinquishes power whenever it feels so, or whenever it is overthrown by another military group or through a revolution. This is why in the case of Nigeria, military regimes have over the years stayed in power for different numbers of years. These include Iransi, 6 months, Gowon, 9 years, Murtala Muhammad, 7 months, Basanjo, 3.5 years, Muhammadu Buhari, 20 months, Babangida, 8 years, Sani Abacha, 5 years, and Salami Abubakar, 7 months. Obviously, without any fixed term of office, a regime is less competitive in character, and this implies that it is likely to be oppressive and authoritarian than a civilian administration, which can be removed through the electoral process at the end of a term. Suspension of the Constitution. In order to ensure its capability to rule by force, the first thing the military does after seizing power is to suspend the Constitution. For the purpose of comparison, we need to note that most of the developed countries of the world operate constitutionalism or constitutional rule. On the other hand, a country that is experiencing economic growth without constitutional rule is likely to do better under the operation of the constitution. Fourthly, rule by decrees and edicts. Still in accordance with the rule by force, the military promulgates decrees for the central government in Nigeria, while it has edicts at the state or regional levels. These are unquestionable laws by the military. 5. Autocracy. Drawing from all the above, military rule is often autocratic and oppressive because it is not accountable to the electorate, which in the first place did not vote the military into power. Similarly, fundamental human rights are easily trampled upon because the military does not recognize the Constitution and its provision. Lastly, non-separation of the executive from legislature. Under normal conditions, the military is part of the executive arm of the modern state. But when it is in power, it combines the functions of implementing laws, that is by the executive, with laws-making functions by the legislature through its decrees and edicts. Ordinarily, the characteristics of military regimes listed and discussed above should tell us why it may not be as popular a system of government as democracy or any other participatory form of government. Study session summary. The lecture basically compared the general characteristics of military rule and civil rule, ranging from the suspension of the Constitution, the abolition of political parties, rule by force, to the non-separation of the executive and legislative arms of government and discouragement of competing interests. The lecture observed that these factors distinguish military rule and therefore make it a potentially more dangerous system of government. End of study session 13. Thank you for listening.